I was lying in a hospital bed, the smell of antiseptic heavy in the air, when my phone buzzed. A shaky video from my roommate filled the screen. My parents, in my dorm room, pulling my posters down, stuffing my clothes into trash bags. In the corner sat a massive box labeled with my name, one I'd never ordered. My mother's voice, calm and certain, cut through the background noise. "This room is ours now." My chest tightened. They didn't just take my space. They took my last shred of safety. And if I didn't act fast, I'd lose everything else too. I grew up learning how to disappear. In every family photo, I was the one standing at the edge, half a smile frozen while the spotlight fell on my older brother. On his birthdays, the table was buried under gifts and a cake large enough for 20 guests. Mine were quieter, one modest box, a store-bought cake and polite claps before the conversation shifted back to him. I told myself it didn't matter, that love wasn't measured in candles or wrapping paper. But the truth seeped in over the years. I was always the afterthought. When I got into college, I promised myself things would change. I'd earn my own place, my own achievements, my own worth. My brother still had everything handed to him. Tuition paid in full, a car as a congratulations gift, his rent covered without question. I worked late nights at the campus cafe, counting tips to cover textbooks. I didn't mind the grind. It meant my victories belonged to me alone. At least that's what I believed. Then came the week my body gave out. Exhaustion, dehydration, and a brutal flu landed me in the hospital. The beeping machines were a constant reminder of how fragile my independence really was. My phone barely lit up. One text from my mother. "Let us know when you're better." No flowers, no visits, not even a call to ask what had happened. I tried to push away the sting. That was just how they were. 3 days into my stay, my phone buzzed again. It was from my roommate, Jenna. "Emily, you need to see this." The video loaded slowly over the hospital's weak Wi-Fi, but when it finally played, my blood went cold. My parents were in my dorm room. My mother was folding my posters into a tube. My father stuffing my clothes into black trash bags. In the background, I caught sight of a massive cardboard box with my name printed in bold black letters, something I'd never ordered. Jenna's voice, low and hurried, whispered into the camera. "They changed the lock. You can't get in anymore." I stared at the screen, my mind struggling to process. The lock, my lock, changed without my consent. The dorm room I'd fought for, the space that had been my one refuge from the constant hierarchy at home, was no longer mine. I called my mother immediately. "It's just for a few weeks," she said breezily, as though she were talking about borrowing a sweater. "We needed a place to store some things. You're in the hospital anyway, and your room was just sitting there." Her tone was final, like there was no room for discussion. My hands trembled around the phone. "That's not your decision to make. It's my dorm, my lease." "Emily," she cut in, voice sharp. "Don't start making this bigger than it is. We're family. Family shares?" Then she hung up. The next day, I got a call from Aunt Lisa, one of the few relatives who ever bothered to check in on me. Her voice was hushed, urgent. "Sweetheart, do you know what they're keeping in your room?" "No," I said slowly. "They told me it's just some boxes." "It's not just boxes. Your father's been hiding inventory from the store. They're in trouble with a supplier, something about unpaid invoices. He said it'd be safer at your place, so the supplier wouldn't find it." The air in the hospital room felt heavier. This wasn't just an invasion of privacy. It was a risk. If something went wrong, my name was on that lease. My dorm was in my name. Anything in there could be tied back to me. I hung up and called the dorm office. The receptionist confirmed my worst fear. The lock was changed on the request of the primary contact on file, she said. My primary contact is me, I replied. Not according to our records. It's your mother. She provided ID and documentation to authorize the change. The room tilted. She had claimed legal authority over my space. She had walked into the dorm office, smiled and taken it. I wanted to scream, to march out of the hospital, but the IV line in my arm was a chain keeping me in place. If you were me, what would you do? Confront them head on or keep quiet and hope it blows over? Because part of me wanted to believe it was a misunderstanding, while the rest knew exactly what it was. Control. That night, Jenna texted again. Something else happened. One of the big boxes. They said it was delivered to you. Just got reported missing. My name was on the delivery slip. My name was on the room. And now, my name was attached to something I'd never touched. I stared at the message, a single thought pounding in my head. This is no longer just about my dorm. The next morning, I called the dormitory management, my voice still shaky but steadier than it had been in days. I explained what had happened, that my room had been taken over without my permission, that my belongings had been moved. The manager, Mr. Harris, paused for a moment before replying. According to our records, you gave permission for your parents to use the room. My grip on the phone tightened. I never did that. I was in the hospital. Well, your primary contact authorized it on your behalf, he said, as if reading from a script. We can't override the decision without proof you objected at the time. Proof. The word echoed in my head. If I wanted my space back, I'd have to fight with evidence, not outrage. I opened my laptop and started collecting everything I had. Screenshots of Jenna's video, the text messages from my mother, my hospital admission papers. It wasn't enough. I knew it wasn't enough. I needed someone who understood how to turn these scraps into a case. That's when I remembered seeing a TikTok months ago. Some upperclassman in the law program who helped students with disputes against the dorm administration. His name was Ryan Chen. He had over 200,000 followers and a reputation for never losing a case. I found his Instagram and sent a desperate DM explaining my situation. I didn't expect a reply, but within an hour he responded, Meet me at the library tomorrow. Bring everything. The next day, I sat across from Ryan at a table piled with my evidence. He flipped through the papers, brows furrowing. They changed the lock and put items in your name in that room. If anything in those boxes is stolen or illegal, it's on you. I know, I said quietly. Okay, he continued. Step 1, we'll request the dorm's security footage. Step 2, we'll file an incident report with the housing office. Step 3, you stop communicating directly with your family about this. I hesitated at the last point. They're still my parents. He looked at me sharply. And they're using you. You can't fight someone who's holding your hand to keep you still. That night, I camped out in the library with my laptop. Between drafting reports and scanning documents, I clicked play on Jenna's video again. My mother's voice came through the tinny speakers, calm, familiar, and so certain. I closed my eyes, letting the sound wash over me. A mix of anger and something softer curled in my chest. I missed her, even as I resented her. That was the part no one understood. How you can love someone and still need to protect yourself from them. 2 days later, Ryan texted me. Got the footage. You need to see this. In the grainy black and white video, my parents walked into my dorm room, wheeling in several massive boxes. The timestamp matched the day I was admitted to the hospital, a tear in the same footage. 2 unfamiliar men arrived and carried one of the boxes back out. That was the exact box Jenna had told me was reported missing. I sat back, the pieces snapping into place. This wasn't just family overstepping boundaries. This was potentially criminal. Then came the retaliation. The first email from my father landed in my inbox with the subject line, "Stop this now." Inside it read, "If you embarrass us, you'll regret it." The second was from my mother. "You are tearing this family apart." The calls started next, multiple times a day. I stopped answering. A week later, I got a letter from the university. They had received a complaint linking me to the missing shipment and were reviewing my eligibility for continued enrollment. I had 10 days to respond before they made a decision. I stared at the letter until the words blurred. This wasn't just about a stolen room anymore. My education, my future, was dangling by a thread. If it were you, would you risk everything to clear your name? Or would you back down to protect yourself? That night, I sat in front of my laptop, fingers hovering over the keyboard. I thought of the hundreds of strangers who'd rallied behind people in stories like mine online. The way truth spread faster than threats when enough eyes were watching. I opened TikTok, hit record, and began to speak. The video I posted was only 2 minutes long, shaky and raw, but it hit like a storm. Within 24 hours, it had been viewed over 500,000 times. Comments poured in, strangers offering support, law students linking resources, even a few attorneys volunteering their help, pro bono. My phone buzzed nonstop, each notification a reminder that I wasn't as alone as I'd felt. One message stood out. Look up the Student Housing Protection Act, Section 4B. They can't legally change your lock without your written consent. I clicked the link, scanning through legal jargon until the words crystallized. If I could prove the signature was forged, the entire lock change was invalid, and they'd be forced to restore my access immediately. For the first time in weeks, the weight on my chest eased. This wasn't just an uphill battle anymore. I actually had leverage. The law was on my side, still, in the quiet between scrolling and strategizing. My mind drifted to the day I first moved into my dorm. I remembered setting my bags down on the bare floor, the air smelling faintly of fresh paint. For the first time in my life, I'd closed a door that was mine alone. No one could barge in. No one could rearrange my things. I'd built a little world inside those 4 walls. Photos on the desk, thrifted mugs lined up by the window. Thinking about it now, my throat tightened. They hadn't just taken a room. They'd taken that world away from me. The next morning, an email landed in my inbox. The subject line was blank. Inside was a PDF attachment, the dorm's official lock change form, complete with my name and signature at the bottom. Only it wasn't my signature. The loops and slants were close, but not mine. My stomach dropped. I called Ryan immediately. "We have proof," I told him, forwarding the document. "Good," he said, voice firm. "Now we build the rest of the case." We formed what Ryan jokingly called the Dorm Defense Squad. Jenna took on the role of tracking all deliveries to my room. Another friend, Malik, combed through the security footage frame by frame. Ryan reached out to a handwriting expert from the law faculty to authenticate the forged signature. A few days later, Malik knocked on my table in the library, grinning. "Got something?" He played an audio recording from his phone. Our neighbor across the hall had overheard my parents talking the day they moved the boxes in. The voice was muffled but clear enough. My father saying, "No one checks if you use family names. That's the loophole." Every piece fit tighter into the puzzle. This wasn't accidental overreach. It was deliberate. Ryan suggested we treat the upcoming hearing like a full trial. We organized evidence binders, prepared witness statements, and even rehearsed my testimony. He warned me it wouldn't just be about proving they'd broken the rules. It would be about making the panel believe the emotional and academic harm they'd caused. Then came the email from my mother. No subject, just a single line. "We can settle this quietly. $5,000, and you drop the complaint." Attached was a note that read, "This is best for everyone. Don't let strangers ruin our family." I stared at the screen, feeling an old instinct tug at me. The urge to keep the peace, to avoid being the one who destroyed things. But the memory of the missing box, the forged signature, and the letter threatening my enrollment burned that instinct away. I wrote back 2 words, "Not interested." An hour later, my phone rang. It was Jenna, breathless. "Emily, I think you need to sit down. What happened?" "I just saw on the news. Your brother's been arrested. Something about stolen electronics linked to a storage location." My blood ran cold. The storage location. The missing box. Suddenly, it all pointed in the same direction. The hearing was held in a small wood-paneled room at the administrative building. A long table separated the housing committee from the rest of us. My parents were already seated when I arrived, their faces carefully composed. My mother wore a somber black sweater, her expression full of worry, as though she were here to plead for a sick child. My father's jaw was set in a way that looked protective to anyone who didn't know him. When the chair of the committee asked them to speak first, my mother launched into her performance. "We were simply trying to take care of our daughter," she said, voice trembling. "She was in the hospital, all alone. We thought it was best to secure her belongings and store some family items where they'd be safe." Her words painted them as the victims of misunderstanding, parents caught in a thankless situation. A couple of committee members nodded sympathetically. Then Ryan stood. "With all due respect, here's what actually happened." He placed a laptop on the table and played the security footage. The room filled with the black and white image of my parents, wheeling in boxes, my mother changing the lock, and 2 unknown men later removing one of the boxes. The timestamp matched the delivery that had been reported stolen. Whispers moved through the committee. My parents' faces stiffened. "Furthermore," Ryan continued, sliding a folder toward the panel, "this is the official lock change authorization form. The signature at the bottom is supposed to be Emily's. It's not. We have an expert statement confirming it's a forgery." I kept my eyes fixed on the table as the panel studied the papers. The silence was thick enough to crush me. Finally, one member asked, "Mrs. Thompson, can you explain this signature?" My mother opened her mouth, but no sound came out. That's when the university's legal advisor, who had been sitting quietly in the corner, spoke up. "If this signature is indeed forged and the lock change was unauthorized, this is not merely a violation of housing policy. It could constitute criminal fraud. The matter may need to be referred to law enforcement." The air shifted instantly. My father's hand tightened into a fist. My mother's face drained of color. The chair called for a recess. We all stepped into the hallway. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "If you win, consider us no longer your family." I stared at the words until Ryan touched my shoulder. "Ignore it. They're trying to rattle you." But the knot in my stomach tightened anyway. When we returned, the committee delivered their decision. My housing rights would be fully restored. The lock would be changed again, this time under my supervision. My parents were ordered to remove all items immediately, and they were liable for the cost of the previous lock change and damages to my belongings. I should have felt triumphant, But as my parents stood and walked out without looking at me, it felt like something far heavier than a key had changed hands. In the days that followed, I tried to adjust to the new quiet. The calls and emails from my family stopped altogether. So did the tuition payments my parents had been making, which meant I had to scramble for extra shifts at the cafe. But the community that had rallied behind me online stepped in. A crowdfunding campaign started by a stranger raised enough to cover my immediate expenses. One evening, I returned to my dorm, and sat on the floor by the window. The air inside felt still, as though the walls themselves were holding their breath. I pushed the window open, letting the late autumn wind rush in. It smelled like rain and something cleaner, freer. For a while I just sat there, breathing it in. The fight was over, but the war inside me, between anger, loss, and relief, was still raging. My phone buzzed. It wasn't from Ryan or Jenna. The number was unfamiliar. The message read, "I know something bigger about them. Call me." The number from the mysterious text still glowed on my screen when I decided to call back. A woman's voice answered, calm but urgent. She introduced herself as a former accountant for my father's business. "I didn't want to get involved," she said. "But after seeing your story, I couldn't keep quiet. Years ago, your parents used your name to secure a business loan. You were a minor at the time, so they falsified the paperwork. That loan went into default. The debt is still technically in your name." Her words landed like a punch. I had thought the worst was behind me. That the forged signature on the lock change form was the peak of their betrayal. But this meant my credit, my legal record, my financial future had been compromised for years without my knowledge. She promised to send me copies of the documents, and she did. My name was there, neatly typed, with a looping fake signature beside it. The date was from when I was 16. I didn't cry. I just sat in my chair, my mind hollow and cold, until the papers blurred in front of me. I realized then that everything I'd fought against in the past weeks was just a symptom of something older, deeper. A pattern that had started long before I left for college. That night I booked an appointment with the campus counseling center. If I didn't start untangling this knot inside me, I was going to drown in it. The first session was strange. Half my sentences ended with, "But they're still my family." And the counselor would gently ask, "What does that mean to you?" I didn't have an answer. I started keeping a journal, not just to track events, but to map the patterns. Flipping back through those pages became a journey into my own history. The time my brother's failing grade got a private tutor, while my straight-A report card earned a shrug. The summer they canceled my trip with friends so he could attend an expensive baseball camp. The countless dinners where my opinions were dismissed before I'd even finished speaking. One rainy afternoon, I sat cross-legged on my bed, clutching my old childhood journal I'd brought from home months ago. The handwriting was rounder, less certain, but the entries told the same story. Mom says it's not my turn yet. They said I'm overreacting. I wish they would notice when I'm gone. I pressed the worn cover to my chest, feeling the weight of that younger version of me. She had been asking for the same thing all along. Fairness, respect, a place to belong. It hit me then. I couldn't change the past, but I could stop pretending it hadn't shaped me, and I could decide that my future wouldn't be another chapter in the same book. The next morning I called Ryan. "I'm going public," I told him. Not just about the dorm, but about the loan. Everything. He hesitated. "That's a big step. Once it's out there, you can't take it back." "I know," I said, "but hiding it hasn't protected me. I'm done keeping their secrets." By the end of the week, my story was featured on several student-run news sites. I shared the loan documents, the forged signatures, the patterns of favoritism and control. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming my name. The response was overwhelming. Emails from students who'd faced similar family exploitation flooded my inbox. One wrote, "You made me realize I'm not crazy for feeling hurt." Another said, "I thought I was the only one." That's when the invitations started. First, a student organization asked me to speak at a campus event on housing rights. Then, a regional student advocacy group reached out. Standing on stage, I felt my voice steady in a way it never had before. I wasn't just telling my story. I was giving other people permission to tell theirs. I started a small podcast, just me, a microphone, and sometimes a guest, talking about student rights, family boundaries, and the messy in-between where love and harm overlap. Listeners grew by the hundreds, then thousands. The more I spoke, the more I realized that what had happened to me was part of a larger systemic problem. One afternoon, I got an email from a national nonprofit dedicated to protecting students from housing and financial exploitation. They wanted me on their team. The role would be in another state, full-time. My heart raced as I read the offer. It was everything I'd been working toward, an opportunity to turn my pain into tangible change. But it meant leaving behind the campus, the friends who had become my lifeline, and the dorm room that had been both a battleground and a sanctuary. I sat in the library that evening, the offer letter open on my laptop, and watched the sunset burn orange over the campus rooftops. I thought about how far I'd come from the girl lying in a hospital bed, watching her world get boxed up and taken away. 2 days before my planned move, a small cardboard package appeared outside my door. There was no return address. Inside, wrapped in tissue paper, was the old brass key to my dorm, one of the first locks I'd ever truly called my own. Alongside it was a folded piece of lined paper. In familiar looping handwriting it read, "I'm sorry. No name. No explanation." I held the key in my palm for a long time, feeling its weight, whether it was from my mother, my father, or someone else entirely. I didn't know, but I knew one thing. It was too late for it to unlock anything in my life. The bus rattled gently as it pulled away from the station, carrying me out of the city where everything had come apart and, somehow, come together again. I sat by the window, my bag tucked close, watching the familiar skyline shrink in the distance. I wasn't running away this time. I was moving toward something of my own choosing. For the first time in my life, my sense of worth didn't feel tethered to my family's approval, or lack of it. I knew now that I had value simply because I existed, because I had fought for myself and for the truth. The scars of the last months were still there, but they had stopped being proof of what I'd lost. They had become proof of what I'd survived. I kept a few threads of contact with distant relatives, an aunt who'd sent me care packages during finals week, a cousin who once slipped me $20 at a holiday dinner. But with my parents, the silence remained, and I stopped trying to fill it. There was a peace in that quiet, in no longer waiting for an apology that might never come. The bus rolled past the campus. Through the smudged glass, I caught glimpses of the brick buildings, the library steps where I'd met Ryan for the first time, the path I used to take back to my dorm. Memories flickered by like scenes from someone else's life, except they were mine, all of them, the good and the brutal alike. I leaned my forehead against the glass, letting the hum of the engine and the rhythm of the road settle me. This chapter of my life was closing, and I wasn't afraid of the next one. Then my phone buzzed in my lap, an email notification. The sender's name made my breath hitch. Mom. The subject line was blank. My thumb hovered over the screen, but I didn't open it. Not yet. The decision of whether to read it would be mine, on my time. When I stepped off the bus in the new city, the air felt different. Salt from the nearby ocean, mixed with the faint tang of diesel from the harbor. I found my way to the small apartment the nonprofit had arranged for me. Its plain white walls a canvas for a life I would build entirely from scratch. My first day on the job was a blur of introductions, case files, and the hum of purposeful activity. Here no one knew me as the girl whose family took her dorm. I was simply Emily Thompson, student housing rights advocate. It was a title I'd earned the hard way. Months passed, and with them came a steady rhythm. Work during the day, writing at night. The manuscript of Dorm Room Justice grew slowly but surely, weaving my story with those of other students who had faced exploitation or betrayal in the places they were supposed to be safest. I launched a fundraiser alongside it, pledging that proceeds would go toward a scholarship for students in emergency housing disputes. When the book finally went to print, I held the first copy in my hands and thought of the girl in the hospital bed months ago, clutching her phone as her world was dismantled. I wished I could tell her that this was coming, that the pieces she thought she'd lost forever would one day fit into something stronger. The book's release brought more speaking invitations, more letters from people who'd felt alone until they heard my story. With each one, the past loosened its grip a little more. I ended my keynote at a national student advocacy conference with the same line I'd written on the last page of my book. They took my room, but I took back my life. The applause rose like a tide, warm and steady, and for the first time, I let it wash over me without flinching. If it were you, standing there with the truth on your side and your life finally in your own hands, what would you do next?